was discussing this particular study with my mom yesterday, and she is 63, and she said, oh, you could leave me with that marshmallow for days, and I would never eat it. Marshmallows are gross. But I said, whatever, Mom. If I left you with a Reese's peanut butter cup, and she said, well, I'd eat it. Even as an adult, knowing that the point of the research was to figure out who had the self-discipline, inherently the self-discipline to be successful, she would still eat it at 63. And I think this piece is funny and it's charming, but it also really brings to the surface that self-discipline for some people is innate because of things that are happening in their home or because of their makeup in terms of personality. They function at a level where they can discipline themselves on instinct. But it's not the bulk of our children, and it's not the bulk of children in other countries. And so this need to integrate the idea of self-discipline with early childhood education is something that came up in a lot of my research, again and again and again, that you want kids to recognize that delayed gratification is better than instant gratification. But that only works if the models in their lives are also operating that way. So if a child doesn't have an adult model, if we read stories and we say, oh, isn't delayed gratification so much better, but the adult models don't function that way, it makes it difficult to get them to really buy into it because they see that adults aren't functioning that way. So that's the first video. Then I watched another video, a longer TED Talk, an 18-minute TED Talk with David Brooks, who writes for the New York Times and Time Magazine, and it was entitled The Social Animal. And a couple of the key elements that I took from his discussion about success and the humans that we see that are most successful is we learn best from people that we love. And when we go back and we talk about the teachers that we really learned from, the vast majority of people say, I knew that person cared about me. I knew they wanted to see me succeed. A lot of people say they took a really hard line with me. They didn't let me get away with the things that I would have gotten away with other people, but it was because I knew they cared about me. And he really pushed the idea that we emerge from our relationships into ourselves. People who are truly successful know how to build relationships. They know how to get the best out of that relationship. They know how to make other people feel valued. They know how to get other people to share their talents and gifts and knowledge. And he really boiled it down into 3 forms of humanism that he says these are subconscious things that we do that make us more successful. And the first one is mind sight or blending. We see this when a child says, for example, I'm a tiger. They are blending this very complex thing that is I, and they are blending another very complex idea, which is tiger. And a child's ability to play and meld those two things together, children who can do that are more likely to become adults who can put themselves in someone else's shoes, who can try to see the world through someone else's eyes, and they are more likely to be successful because they have empathy. They have empathy, and empathy allows us to be more successful. The second trait of the new humanism that he talked about is an equal poise, an awareness of our own biases and failures. And the example he gave was great because he said that 95% of college professors in the United States rate themselves in the top 1% of college professors.
Wow.
Meaning they all think they're great. You know, that they don't have the ability. 95% of college professors cannot be in the top 1% of college professors, but they have that bias about themselves that makes it so they can't see where they fit in with everybody else. People who are willing to accept their own bias and recognize their strengths and weaknesses are more likely to be successful than people who live without that awareness. And the third thing that he talked about is metis, or street smarts. People who have street smarts, who notice details, who notice the nuances of conversation, who pick up on nonverbal cues. These are people who are more likely to be successful. They know other people. He hit on a couple of studies where, like, graduation success rates. He said that they did a study at the University of Minneapolis where they took 18-month-old babies and they put them in a little car seat, and their mother was in front of them, and their mother would coo, would move her tongue, would open her eyes, would smile. They found that the babies that mirrored those movements, that were using that sense of mind sight, that were communicating with their mothers, that were mimicking their mothers, that was the highest predictor of high school graduation. That those babies that already had that connection, because we emerge from the relationships we make. They said children that didn't mimic their mothers or have that connection were less likely to graduate from high school. Because they couldn't build the necessary relationships to be successful. And really what Brooks gets at is that the human is a social animal, period. In order to achieve success, we need each other. And our success is measured by our happiness. It is measured by where we fit in with other people. Are we happy with the people that we're with? Are we happy with the way we affect them? Really a great TED Talk, only 18 minutes, highly recommend it. Then moved into an article talking about why we're so locked into our grades. I thought it was important to examine grades because grades are how we measure success. And she offered up 5 obstacles for why we can't change essentially a defunct grading system. And offered the idea that a lot of people argue that grades should provide the basis for differentiation. And she argued that no, if you have a low-functioning kid that's doing their absolute best work, they shouldn't be receiving a low grade. And therefore, you could have 2 kids with an A, and they could both be achieving success, but it might look very different. Grade distribution should resemble a normal bell-shaped curve. This is an argument that she argues does not make sense. The bell-shaped curve is a scientific method that's used, or a mathematical method, when there is no outside altering of a situation. If we simply let the crops grow as they are, some will have high yields, some will have low yields, and there will be an average that most will be closer to. Once you start adding fertilizer, using irrigation systems, then, theoretically, everything should be pushing towards the higher yields, okay? And it's simply, people who are arguing this simply don't understand the mathematical idea behind a bell curve. The point of the bell curve is without intervention. All of our classrooms should be with intervention for success. Grades should be based on students standing among classmates. I think we all know that being the best of a really low group shouldn't make you think that you're successful. Just like being the lowest out of a highly successful group should not make you believe that you're not successful. And so this idea of standings and class standings based on grades is really, again, a misguided notion about what success is. Poor grades prompt students to try harder. Maybe, if it's a high-achieving student that consistently achieves highly and they get a poor grade, that might threaten them, it might threaten the identity they've made, and they might work harder. But when you have kids that always get Fs, there is absolutely no data that suggests that giving that kid another F is going to make them try. It's not. And then lastly, students should receive 1 grade for each subject or course. And this also came up in terms of success. The example that was given across the board was that we would never say, we're going to take your height, your weight, your diet, your blood cell counts, your ability to blink, all of that, and we're going to slap 1 body grade on it. And we'll understand your body by saying, they've got an A body, they've got a B body. But in school, we take behavior, we take quizzes, we take discussion, we take Did you show up on time to class? We take formative and summative assessment, and we try to take all of these measures that are in fact very, very different and put one measurement on it and say, you got an A for this class. One of the things that they argue is that that's misguided. That's a misguided notion to say that a child's attentiveness and behavior is the same as the formative assessment that they take. Can you wiggle the doodad? It just went dark. Thank you. Again, a very interesting article, pretty short, raises some really compelling questions about what exactly are we grading and what is the point of giving this grade. The next article examined a group of schools in New York that use standardized data and authentic assessment to a really positive effect. And I just want to read this chunk that talks about what the schools do. Instead of test prep, students and teachers focus on work that culminates in 4 or more final projects in core academic areas. 1, literary analysis. 2, a science experiment and related research project. 3, an extended mathematics problem-solving project. And 4, a research paper in social studies demonstrating the use of argument and evidence. And that these are the graduation requirements, that instead of saying, you've got to pass 3 science classes, they say, you design an experiment and you take the necessary time to complete that experiment, to write the research report, to have it evaluated, to go back, to keep working, and there are classes still offered. The research projects are above and beyond. And just the incredible achievement of these students in these schools compared to other public schools in New York, kids who are no different in terms of economic background or test scores, but because of this authentic assessment, their achievement in college, their graduation rates, the ability of these kids to go out and get jobs, they know how to be successful, not just pass a class. The third article that I read that kind of carries on to the next page examined a cohort of college freshmen, 2002. They brought them in and they had ACT scores, SAT, had the parents gone to college, race, dating status, everything. Lots of basic information about these kids. And then they had these kids take an emotional IQ test. What they found was that the emotional IQ of the student was a better predictor for graduation and job placement than the IQ. That the ability of students to engage in a community, learn from other people, care about other people, control themselves, was more important for their success than their IQ. And the 4 factors really say it. People who were strong in empathy were more likely to graduate from college. People who had a strong sense of social responsibility, more likely to graduate from college. People who featured or exhibited strong impulse control, same thing, back to the marshmallow experiment, more likely to graduate from college. It was interesting because people who, at 17, 18 years old, incoming college freshmen, exhibited high levels of flexibility, were actually less likely to graduate. I found that to be surprising, so did the researchers. But they were more likely to transfer. They found it easier to go get a job, whatever. The group most likely to graduate from college, based on this study, fresh out of high school, white, female, 1 or both parents graduating from college, single, living on campus. A really remarkable study that brings to the forefront really a lot of what my project was about, which is how are we going to help these kids to be successful? We know we want them to be successful. How are we going to help them? And one thing that just keeps coming up is we've got to teach interpersonal communications. And we've got to teach it from the cradle up. We are social animals. We learn from people who we love. If we want to be successful, we have to network. We emerge as ourselves through our relationships. We have to build the ability to form relationships for our kids. The last text that I looked at, oh, where did I put it? Where did I put it? It's green. It's a book. It's a green book. It's called Creating Innovate. Oh, here we go. Creating Innovators by Tony Wagner. It's a fantastic and innovative book in and of itself. He talks about making a print book and how it seems ironic to write a book about innovation in a style that's 500 years old. And so they actually went in, and when they wrote the book, they include QAR codes. So as you're reading the book, if you want to learn more about a concept or a person, you scan it into your smartphone and it takes you to a link. And it adds more depth. It is a combination of old and new, and it is an innovative print text. Anybody with a smartphone can use these links. This is the future of print. It's the integration of our technology and our print. He boils down innovation. I don't want to say boils down. He brings to the forefront some common themes for people who have been successful and people who are innovators. And the three themes are play, passion, and purpose. That blending, I am a tiger, that builds empathy. You've got to be able to play. We have to let our kids play. Passion, let them pursue things they're interested in. Don't say, no, that's not quite the assignment. Say, how can we complete the assignment and pursue your passion? Don't say no. Let them pursue it. Let them get excited about something. Don't say, you will be successful if you do the assignment. That's not how success happens. And then lastly, purpose. That you, as a teacher of children, as a teacher of tiny social animals, has to have a purpose. And if that purpose is to make them successful, then your purpose is building interpersonal communication skills. That's how people become successful. They learn how to control themselves, they learn how to deal with other people, and they develop a sense of social responsibility. Ideas for teachers, offering what should we then be doing in our classrooms. A number of these articles called on teachers, even at young grades, to build in components of community service, and for families to build in components of serving others and caring for others, that allows children to develop social responsibility and empathy. If we care about the community that we're in, we're more likely to engage in activities that will allow us to be successful. Again, really pushing the idea of relating to others, building positive relationships with your students, letting them know you care about them in a way that they can believe and trust. And if students are not successful, recognizing that giving them a failing grade doesn't make them successful. It tells them they're a failure. And a lot of schools that want their kids to be successful have turned away from Fs, and they've said, you get an incomplete, and you don't get credit for this course until you've done the learning for this course. And if it goes into summer or if it goes into next year, fine. But you don't get to pass this class until you've done this learning, which we have deemed critical. Success! That's my presentation.
Good job.
Great stuff. I mean,